Hello and welcome back to the Little Craft House. Today I thought we would explore all the uses that liquid polymer clay has to offer. So if you haven't come across it before, it is polymer clay but in liquid form, and it is an extremely versatile product. So there are so many different uses that you can use it for. So yeah, we're going to have a look at a whole bunch of ways to use it today. There is many more uses, but we're just going to cover some of them today. So I hope you enjoy this tutorial, and yeah, let's get started. Okay, so these are my three liquid clays that I have. They do obviously come in a massive range of colours now. Sculpey recently has increased the colours available. However, I have these three. I find these ones the most versatile. So obviously I've got the black, I've got a white, and I've got a, it's written here really tiny, a clear translucent. Yeah, these three I like to use because both with the white and the translucent you can tint these to make any colour that you like. So I find these ones to be the most versatile. So when we're looking at the bottle, it's got a little twisty nozzle here, which means that it's really easy to apply through that little bit on the top. So one of the most important things that we need to do before we start using our liquid clay is to give it a really good stir. Now, I'm not sure if you're able to see through the bottles here, but whilst they're being stored, they do tend to separate. So you end up with a lot of glugginess down the bottom and some clear liquid towards the top. Yeah, I'm not sure if you can see in there. So what I like to do is just grab my metal skewer and I'll give it a really good stir until it's nice and runny and all the same consistency. So it's kind of like conditioning the liquid clay. So while I'm giving this a stir, I thought I would just very quickly mention that these three were all from the Sculpey brand. Cernit and Fimo also make their own brands of liquid clay as well. So yeah, there's a nice big range of ones that you can choose to use. Alright, so I thought we would start by making some custom colours with our liquid clay. So I'm just going to pour some into my paint palette here, and we're going to tint them using some different mediums. So I'm going to use the clear transparent liquid clay. This one gives the best colouring. If you use the white, it tends to dull the colours a little bit. So I'm going to mix it in with some paint. This one here is a Montmartre acrylic paint, and I don't need to add much at all, just a little tiny bit like so. I can add more if I want afterwards, but each of these additives that I'm adding in to tint the colours today are all compatible with normal polymer clay. So I know that this paint will be fine to use, the same as the pigments that I'm going to use for the other two as well. So I know that these are compatible, and I know that they will be fine in the oven as well. Right, next colour I'm going to add is some alcohol ink. So this one is the Panata brand, and I'm just giving it a nice good shake just to mix it all up. And this one's quite an intense, strong colour, so I definitely don't need to add much of that at all to this. I'm being very careful not to squirt it in, but rather just have a little drop. And you can see there it looks quite dark, but as I mix it in, it's going to just tint that liquid clay nicely, and it's not going to be quite as dark. And the third colouring we are going to use is with some Pearlex pigment powder. So once again, I use this all the time on my polymer clay, so I know that it will work well with the liquid clay. And once again, you don't need to add much at all to get a decent colour. Now, these are just three things that you can add to colour your polymer clay, your liquid polymer clay. There are, of course, many other things. You can use other inks and dyes, or even things like chalk pastels or chalks to colour as well. So yeah, just have a play around and see what colourings you can come up with. And your general rule of thumb is that if it's okay to use on your normal polymer clay, it is also okay to use in your liquid clay. Now that I have these colours all nicely mixed up, we're going to do our first project with them. So I've got myself a Sculpey mould here and also this rubber tipped tool. The Sculpey mould is a really good one because it is quite thin and it is also oven bakeable. So to cure our liquid polymer clay, it does require an oven, the same as your regular polymer clay. So anything that you apply it to or into, just make sure that that is also oven safe. So I'm going to paint on my liquid clay here into the mould, and I think I'm just going to go more random. I think I originally started thinking I'll do a bit of a pattern, but I'm just going to go completely random and apply the liquid clay into the mould. So I like to use this little rubber tipped or silicone tipped tool here because it's got quite a nice little tip on the end of it, allowing me to scoop the liquid clay onto the mould to create a design. Sometimes I'll use my little ball tipped tools, but I find that I can't scoop as easy. So this one's definitely easier because it's flatter. It's also super easy to clean as well. Between each colour, I'm just giving it a quick wipe with an alcohol wipe, and then I'm able to just continue to use it. Now here I've got a little scraper. This scraper came with the mould. I'm just trying to make sure I'm pushing all that clay in, making sure there's no bubbles between the design, and just scraping the clay just to get off any extra excess as well. So as I scrape it, all the excess off, I'm going to try and push it into the other design that is sitting right next to this one. That way I'm going to have no wastage. And I'll also just grab any of the bits of liquid clay left in my paint palette there and just fill in those gaps. The one thing that I get a little bit frustrated with this mould is that there is only one of each design on there, so I can't do pairs at the same time, but I've already previously done some, so I'm hoping that these will then kind of match. They don't have to be identical, but they're definitely the same colours, so they will match. So when it comes to baking this liquid clay, the bottle actually suggests a higher temperature than what I bake my normal polymer clay on. So it actually suggests 300 degrees Fahrenheit or 149 degrees Celsius. So I tend to just keep my oven at the same temperature as normal, and I've not had any issues. But yeah, for 15 minutes it requires baking, so it's not quite as long because it is quite thin. Okay, so these ones are fresh out the oven. I've let it cool down a little bit, and you can see there that it's got a nice little shimmer to it. So I'm just going to really gently start the peel, removing the clay from the mould. I'm always really careful. I feel like it's delicate, but it actually isn't as delicate as what you would think. It's pretty tough and pretty sturdy once it is cured. So you have a pretty tough time actually ripping it. It does still remain quite flexible though, so I would never be able to make a pair of earrings out of these designs because they're so thin, but I would be able to, and which is what I'm probably going to do, is make a disc, maybe a black disc, and then adhere this onto it. So that turned out really pretty. I really love the colours and the way that it has mixed. And let's go to the smaller one as well. So pretty, absolutely beautiful. And this is a really nice different technique to do as well by using the liquid clay rather than just using our solid blocks of clay all the time. Now you'll notice that there are a few little smudgy bits around the edges here as well. So I'll just take my scissors and trim those bits off. Because it's not firm like your regular clay, sanding probably wouldn't work, but scissors definitely do. So just a nice pair of sharp scissors and just trim those edges off. Okay, so another use for our liquid polymer clay is to adhere some backs onto our earrings. So doing some embedding. Now this isn't normally a technique I do. I usually just stick with super glue, but I know that a lot of people do like to embed because it gives them the extra security and also peace of mind knowing that the backs will not come off. So I've got my little daisy flowers here that I have already created, and I've got another piece of raw clay, and I'm just going to cut out 2 small little circles here, and we're going to use those. So I'm actually going to show 2 different ways to embed your stud backs. So the first is using the liquid clay with clay. So I've already stirred up my liquid clay, and it doesn't really matter what color you're using. I'm using the translucent though, so it's not obvious. If you had a clay that were, the liquid clay that was the same color as your earring pieces, then that would probably actually be better. So I'm just going to put a little dot down on each of these, and that is going to act like a glue. Now I've realised that my earring backs that I pulled out were different sizes, so I just need to make sure that I've got some pairs here that are the same size. And one thing to remember is not to add glue and then the liquid clay, because you don't want to be putting glue into the oven. So we're using the liquid clay because that's going to act as a glue. Right, so I'm just going to take my little circles that I have already cut, and I'm just going to poke the earring back onto that circle, so that the circle is going to come down and sit over the top of the flat bit of the post. And then I'm just going to put it onto where I've got the liquid clay on my piece. Sorry, it's a little bit hard to see. I should have zoomed in. I was too busy concentrating. And then just to make sure that it has definitely adhered well, I'm going to get my little ball-tipped tool, and then we're just going to press down around those edges just to create additional seal onto the piece. So did I mention before, my earring pieces are already baked, but the little circle that I've just put on is raw. You could do this all in one go whilst your pieces are raw, but then you risk damaging the front of your pieces. So I like to cook my shapes first and then add the backs if I'm doing it in this way. And we're going to rebake these to cure the clay that we've just put on the back, as well as curing the liquid clay. So with your polymer clay, you can bake multiple times without it affecting your pieces. So yeah, we're just going to pop those back in the oven, and I'm just going to do it at the normal clay time and temperature. Now, the second way that we are going to embed our earring posts is to do it without the addition of the polymer clay. So I've got my already cured studs here. I'm just making sure I've got them in the right direction, and we're just going to solely use the liquid clay to do the embedding. So once again, I'm going to be using the transparent liquid clay. If you had a liquid clay that was a matching color to your stud, of course you could use that, and it would be it would blend in nicely. So I'm going to do a little tiny dot first of the liquid clay to once again act as my glue for the stud. I'm going to pop the stud pieces on like so. And then I am going to add some more clay, and this time I'm going to go over the top of that pad that's on there. And then we're also going to go over onto the stud slightly. So this will create a bond right over the top of the piece and onto your stud. Now, if you wanted to cover the entire backing with the liquid clay, you could definitely do that. I just like to do it just over that back bit though. Right, so these ones are now out of the oven, and I just thought I would show you how they turned out. So as you can see with the hexagon ones here, the transparent clay isn't overly noticeable. It's on there just slightly, and then you can't even see the liquid clay with the little flowers. Both ways are a nice, neat backing, and they are quite strong as well. So adding a little bit of pressure there, they're not coming off, they're not snapping. It just really gives that extra peace of mind, especially if you're going to be selling your pieces. Now, one thing to note as well is that it will shorten your posts slightly, especially using the clay method as well. But most of the time that isn't an issue, and it can actually be a benefit if you're doing earrings for small children who have little earlobes, because it makes the posts smaller. Another use for our liquid clay is to add some glitter to some already baked clay. So this way it's kind of like in place of a resin, but more of like a matte finish resin rather than a shiny resin. So I'm taking my, once again, transparent liquid clay, and I'm going to add some glitter into it. Now, I don't need too much glitter. One thing to note though is that it will slightly dull the sparkle of the glitter. So I know I've just referenced resin, which is super shiny and enhances things like the sparkle of glitter. The liquid clay will slightly dull the sparkle, but it will still add a really nice top coat and a really nice finish to our clay. So I've added the little bit of glitter here, and I'm now just going to paint it on to my pieces. Now, this is actually a really good way to add glitter because you're not risking glitter going everywhere. So even once it's applied, it's not going to fall off. It is going to bond properly to the clay, and it's not going to be loose and fall off and make a mess everywhere. And so to apply this, I am going to be using my little ball tool. I find that I can get really precise design with the ball tool. And you can see while I'm applying it here, the liquid clay has a bit of a white look to it. Once it is baked, that will go clear, so don't worry about that, but it actually makes it a lot easier to apply because you can see where we've applied it, and I can see if I've missed any spots. And once again, once I've added my final little touches here, I shall pop it back into the oven and cure it for another 15 minutes until that liquid clay has set. And here we go, it is finished. So as you can see, the glitter is there, it is definitely visible, and it feels beautiful. It's not rough, it has that beautiful smooth finish to it, and the liquid clay has of course gone clear. My next use for the liquid clay is probably one of the most useful ones. So I have this polymer clay here that just will not condition. It's not in as bad of a state as some that I've had, but this was one that I've just tried to use recently, and I cannot seem to get it to condition nicely. When I pop it through the roller, it just crumbles and it just makes a big mess on my roller as I'm trying to hand condition. So what I'm going to do is chop it up into small little pieces. We're then going to put it all into a little Ziploc plastic bag. So you don't have to do the bag, but this way keeps it much cleaner. I'm going to grab my liquid clay, which I have already pre-stirred, and I'm going to add some to it. Now, it's better to not add too much to start with because you can always add some more afterwards. And I'm just going to gently massage it into my clay. So the idea behind this is just to add some moisture back into my clay, which is obviously dried out too much. This is being very frustrating and getting stuck in the corner here, and I'm trying my hardest not to bust the bag open, but I'm just giving it some little wiggles, and then here we go. Able to just massage it in and get some of that liquid clay through it all, touching all the pieces, and yeah, getting the moisture back in. Once I think I've done it enough, I'm going to start with the acrylic roller, and I'm just going to start adding some pressure and rolling it to get it to stick together within the bag first. I don't want to remove it from the bag until I've done a few rounds of it in the bag, otherwise I'm going to get that sticky liquid clay all over my acrylic roller, all over my hands and all over my tile. So I'm just going to keep it in the bag as long as I can, just trying to still fold it over within the bag, and yeah, just getting that conditioning going whilst with that protection on it. Once I'm ready, I can take it out of the bag and then just start conditioning like normal. So it's still a little bit tough to start with, but you can see it is much better and it is definitely getting there, making it easier to condition than what it was before, because before it just crumbled. Right, our next use for the liquid clay is one of the most, I don't know, I think this one's probably one of the most obvious things to do. Now, I will pre-warn you and say that this little donut that I'm going to make is the most dodgiest little donut that I have ever made. I have made probably hundreds of little donuts before, and today's one just didn't play nice, just doesn't turn out great. But you get the idea and you can definitely see how you'll use the liquid clay in this project. So I, for starters, have used the wrong coloured clay for the donut. I probably should have gone lighter, but I did just use some scrap clay here. I like to use Sculpey 3 for the icing here because it's nice and soft and I can just squish it around in my fingers, make it a little bit uneven, and then just press it down and around my donut base, like so. And then I'm going to grab a tool. This one I'm just going to use the paintbrush and I'm going to poke a hole in the center to make the donut hole. I also did this donut a really strange size. I've done bigger than this before for magnets and brooches, and I've done smaller for earrings, but this one here is a bit of a funny size. Now here's the liquid clay. I'm going to use white for this one, and this way you'll be able to see the difference between the white and the clear transparent, because the white will stay white. So going on and applying it, it looks exactly the same, but once baked this will stay with the white colouring. Now it also serves two purposes. One, because it looks like icing, and two, it is going to glue these sprinkles on, so there's no need for any other sort of adhesive. It's just going to glue directly onto that white liquid clay. Now, if you would like me to redo this project, let me know. I might do it as a reel, and I'll do it in a proper way so that it actually looks like a nice donut rather than this dodgy donut. But yes, let me know in the comments and I will work on a reel to show you guys so that way you can see how to do it properly. Right, so here he is all baked up. As you can see, that liquid clay has stayed exactly the same and it hasn't gone clear like the transparent one does. Okay, so next up I'm going to do another little demonstration on how we can use the liquid clay as a glue. But this time we're going to do it between two sets of already baked components. Now I'm going to demonstrate this with earrings, but this would actually become really helpful if you were doing something more sculptural and more of a 3D style project. So I've actually done this before and then realized what I'd done, which is why I've used the liquid clay in this situation before. So with these pieces that I'm creating here, I've embedded a little charm into the polymer clay. Now by themselves, the charms won't actually stay. Being metal, it will just fall out, or over time it will just pop out, even once baked. So it does need something to hold it into the clay. Now with this design, I probably could just attach it whilst it's raw, but I do want the pieces to be flat. So I'm going to cook them both first and then we're going to attach them. So I'm just going to do some little square toppers here. And then I'm just going to pop them all into the oven and get them all baked up. Okay, so fresh out the oven, these are nicely baked up. And at the moment, those little gold charms are holding in okay, but I do know that over time they will fall out, so we have to adhere them in. So for this design, I would like the toppers to sit just like this, just over the top, just a little bit. That's going to be enough to hold that charm so that it won't fall out. and it's just a cute little design. So as I said before, I could have done this whilst raw, but then those little squares would probably fold and not sit nice and straight. So I'm going to grab my baking tray and I'm going to grab a couple of pieces of already baked clay here. These two are just out of my scraps bin. The design on the other side didn't work properly, so I'm just going to use them to prop up those top pieces. So they're not part of this design, although colour wise it actually looks quite nice. They're not part of this design, they are just there to support the top of my little squares. So I've just set it how I would like them to sit so that I know the positioning and how to do it here. And I'm just going to grab that liquid clay and we're going to use it like a glue. So I just realised that I hadn't stirred it properly and it had all kind of settled. So I've just given it another quick stir, and then I'm just going to grab my little ball-tipped tool because this is a little bit more precise. My lid does tend to leak, so I don't use the nozzle on my transparent one. I only use the nozzles on my other one, just in case you're wondering. So I'm going to grab the ball tool here and I'm just going to put some little dots of the liquid clay where I want to glue my pieces on. And I am making sure that this is going over both the metal and the polymer clay. And then I can reposition my toppers onto the top so that they are sitting in the right spot. Now I don't want to apply too much of the liquid clay because I don't want it to spill over. So just a small little dot should be enough to hold these. And then once again, I shall pop them into the oven and get that liquid clay all baked up. Right, so removing those guide pieces, and they are nice and secure. I'll now be able to attach my little stud toppers like I normally would. Yeah, they're nice. See how they're nice and flat because I had that guide piece there. So yeah, I'm really happy with the way that these ones turned out. Right, and so that brings us to the end of today's little tutorial and our little demonstration on ways to use the liquid clay. So I hope this has inspired you guys and given you some ideas of different ways to use your liquid clay. It's really a fun product because there's just lots of different ways that you can use them. There is a few other ways which I have up my sleeve. Hopefully I'll be able to share those on Reels for you. I didn't want to make today's tutorial too long. So anyway, thank you for joining me today and I hope you have enjoyed it. If you have a favourite way to use liquid clay and I haven't covered it today, pop it down in the comments below. If it's not something I've tried before, I would love to give it a go because I'd love to find some more uses as well. So thanks again guys, and I shall see you again next week. Bye!